I've got no roots, but my home was never on the ground. I've got no roots, but my home was never on the ground. I've got no roots. I've got no roots. I've got no roots, but my home was never.
Oh guys, have you ever heard about the world is having an inflation recently?
Yeah, I also read that China is one of the developed countries that are having an inflation.
Yeah, it seems like inflation is becoming a big issue there.
Why though the inflation keeps happening? I mean, what's the reason and how the inflation happens?
I want to. How about let us study and make a report about the inflation in China? That's a great idea.
I agree with you.
Cause I'm lost in the way you move, the way you feel. Possibilities, I look like all you need.
Firstly, let us start with the introduction. In this report, we will look throughout the economic of China and the issue of inflation. Firstly, we'll dive into the background of China, including its geographical area. Then, we will go to the inflation data and the effect of inflation. We will also study a few government approach to overcome inflation and give a few student recommendations to solve inflations. Through this, we will know the effect of inflation towards a certain country.
Next, I'll be explaining about the background of China. History of China. China's history covers a vast geographic area and several millennia. Every area that is currently seen as being a part of China has gone through times of prosperity, division, unrest, and unity. The Yangtze Basin and the Yellow River Valley form the geographic center of the Chinese cultural sphere, where Chinese civilization initially began to flourish. China has 32 provinces, 5 autonomous regions, 4 municipalities, and 2 special administrative regions make up China's 33 administrative units that are directly under the control of the central government. Other than that, China has the biggest temperature difference between its northern and southern borders of any nation in the world. Its climate varies from severely dry, desert-like conditions in the northwest to tropical monsoon in the southeast. China has one of the greatest ranges of ecological niches in the world, occupied by a larger number of plant and animal species, due to the diversity of its climate and relief. In fact, China is home to almost every kind of plant found in the northern hemisphere, with the exception of those located in the Arctic tundra. Population of China. The concerns over the future expansion of the second largest economy in the world are highlighted by the fact that China's population has decreased in the last year in between 2013 and 2023. The population began to decline in 2023, reaching 1.425 billion by 2023 after a steady 8 years of growth, from 1.376 billion in 2013. This tendency is caused by a low birth rate, an aging population, and restricted immigration. The need for initiative to address the problems brought on by an older population, such as the strain on social services and the labor market, is highlighted by the population decline. National income for China from 2013 to 2023. China's GDP, gross domestic product, was valued at $20.2 thousand billion in 2023, as reported by the World Bank. China's GDP makes up 7.74% of the global economy. Gross national income. The gross national income, GNI, is equal to the GDP less the net taxes on imports and production, less employee compensation, property income that is owed to other countries, and the corresponding amount of receivable from those countries. Put another way, GNI is GDP less primary incomes that are owed to non-resident units and primary incomes that are accrued from those units. GNI can also be calculated as the total of balances of gross primary earnings across all sectors at market prices. Gross domestic products in China. The gross domestic output (GDP) of China was approximately $17.7 trillion in 2023. China was first in the world GDP rankings that year and second when compared to the GDPs of the other BRIC nations, India, Russia, and Brazil. The main cause of China's GDP stagnation in US dollars in 2022 and 2023 was the US dollar's gain. China's real GDP grew at 3.2% in 2023 after growing by 3% in 2022. China's GDP per person was estimated to be 12,514 USD in 2023. Main economic sectors in China. Services. More than 54% of China's economic production in 2023 came from the services sector. Conversely, in 2013, the services sector accounted for marginally over 46% of the GDP. One of the main forces behind growth and one that keeps the nation's economy growing is consumption of commodities. With a 7.2% annual gain, the nation recorded 6.63 trillion USD in 2023. Industry and manufacturing. Around 38% of China's GDP came from the country's manufacturing and industrial sectors in 2023. March 2024 saw a 4.5% reading for China's industrial production, which has been declining in recent years. Agriculture. By the end of 2023, the GDP of China's agriculture sector, which ranks third, accounted for 7.1% of the nation's overall production. From 8.9% in 2013, the GDP share has decreased. While it may not be as high as developing market nations in Africa, the percentage is nevertheless greater than the 5.6% share of the US GDP projected for 2023.
For the next slides, I'll be talking and presenting about 10 years inflation data, trends in inflation, and issues influencing inflation in China.
From 2012 to 2022, China's inflation rate showed notable fluctuations. It started at 2.6% in 2012 and 2013, then dropped to 1.9% in 2014 and further to 1.4% in 2015. The rate rose to 2.0% in 2016, decreased to 1.6% in 2017, and slightly increased to 2.1% in 2018. In 2019, it peaked at 2.9%, fell to 2.4% in 2020, reached a low of 1.0% in 2021, and then rose again to 2.0% in 2022. This reflects China's economic changes influenced by various factors over the decade. Now let's move on to the trends in inflation of China. For the moderate inflation rates, from 2013 to 2022, China's inflation rates typically range between 1% and 3%, averaging 2% annually due to managed growth and government interventions. During 2018 to 2022, inflation remained low despite minor fluctuations, with a peak of 4.5% in 2019 caused by African swine disease and low of 0.9% in 2021 due to the economic impact of COVID-19. Next, the Consumer Price Index and Producer Price Index. The Consumer Price Index (CPI) in China was generally stable, though it experienced occasional sharp swings. For example, the economic slowdown caused by the pandemic led to a CPI end-of-period rate of just 0.2% in 2020. In contrast, the Producer Price Index (PPI) was more volatile. PPI saw significant fluctuations, with increasing commodity prices driving a peak increase of 10.3% at the end of 2021. This surge was followed by a decline in 2022 due to supply chain adjustments and policy interventions aimed at stabilizing prices. Next, let's discover issues influencing inflation in China. Food prices. In 2019, China's Consumer Price Index saw a significant spike due to higher pork prices caused by African swine fever. This highlighted China's vulnerability to agricultural sector fluctuations impacted affecting overall economic stability. Commodity prices. In 2021, global commodity price increases led to a substantial spike in China's PPI, raising manufacturing costs significantly. For the third issue, economic policies. In management, China adjusts rates, uses stimulus and controls money to manage inflation and growth. For the supply chains, COVID-19 spiked inflation initially, stabilizing as demand normalized. For the fourth issue, global economic conditions. Trade tensions, especially with the US, affected inflation by influencing prices of imported goods through tariffs and trade restrictions. And the last issues influencing inflation in China is domestic consumption. Consumer trust and economic policies influence inflation, with measures during downturns aimed at boosting consumption and controlling inflation.
I will explain the effect of inflation towards China, which is society, government and economy. Firstly, society. China faced inflation, disrupting its economy and causing long-term structural changes. Businesses face increased costs, impacting profit margins and supply chain disruptions. Inflation may worsen the income gap, making basic necessities difficult for people with fixed incomes. Consistent inflation may lead to protests and increased pressure on the government to stabilize prices. Let's move on to government. Inflation in China impacts social stability, economic competitiveness and prosperity. The People's Bank of China (PBOC) manage inflation through interest rate adjustment and money supply changes. Inflation raises production costs, affecting China's global market competitiveness. High inflation can weaken public trust and election outcomes, necessitating government measures like price restrictions and subsidies. And lastly is economy. Faced inflationary pressures due to supply chain disruptions, commodity price changes, and policy shift. High inflation leads to increased prices, increased expenses for basic needs, and decreased purchasing power. Effective management of inflation may not significantly restrict economic growth, but moderate increase can stimulate consumer spending and reduce investment and consumption.
Next, I'll be talking about how government approach to overcome inflation.
First, expansionary monetary policy. Monetary policy is a policy that referring to action that be taken by country's central bank. This policy is to achieve the economic growth and to solve the macroeconomics problem. This policy is also classified as expansionary monetary policy and contractionary policy. China had facing an inflation where the price is increasing and fall in the purchasing value of money. An expansionary monetary policy makes more money available to the economy. However, contractionary policy reduces the amount of money in use in a country. The People's Bank of China, that also known as PBOC, did a various way to get their economy back on track as it was used to be. Here are some measures to control inflation by using expansionary monetary policy. First, interest rate. Reduced consumer spending and company investment may result from higher interest rates, which could make saving money easier and making borrowing cheaper. Second, discount rates. Increasing a discount rate is a good method to control inflation. Commercial banks have to pay more in interest when they borrow money from the central bank when the discount rate is raised. Third, increase required reserve ratio. Banks' capacity to lend money is directly impacted by increasing the required reserve ratio. Banks have less money available for lending since they have to keep a higher percentage of their deposits in reserve. Next policy is fiscal policy. Fiscal policy is different from monetary policy. Fiscal policy can be referring to the government's decisions regarding to increase production and reduce spending. It's generally used by governments to reduce poverty and encourage strong, sustainable growth. There are some key measures that China might take to reduce inflation. China can lowering the economy's total demand by reducing government spending.
This involves scaling back on government efforts that encourage spending by consumers, reducing subsidies, and lowering back on infrastructure project investment. Increasing tax on both individuals and businesses can decrease disposable income, which will decrease investment and consumption.
Then, I'm gonna show some of the students' recommendation to overcome inflation. Some of the students' recommendation is through budgeting. This is because through budgeting, we can create a budget on how much we can spend and only plan to spend on the things that we need. This way, we can identify where we spend our money and know how much money we are having coming in or out. Next is through investment. Through investment, we can also diversify our ways of making money through spreading our investment across the different asset classes like stocks, bonds, and real estate. This way, we can reduce risk. This way also can help us to cope with the inflation that is happening at the moment. Next is through reducing debts. By reducing debts, it can help protect against inflation as it reduces the amount of money that need to be spent on interest payment, freeing up more funds for other expenses. Lastly is through public awareness. This way, we can increase the awareness toward the issues of inflation. This way also can help us to inform the citizen to contribute better to our economic stability. Plus, we can also launch an awareness campaign and use social media and school platforms to disseminate information. Lastly, for the conclusion of the report, in conclusion, this report has dived into the issue of inflation in China. The purpose of this report is to investigate an inflation issues that is happening in China by their causes and ways to overcome it. This report also was written to elucidate the uniqueness of factors and circumstances that are happening in China that can be the factors of inflation. To conclude, this report is addressing the issue of inflation in China, and it also requires a multifaceted approach that considers us to measure both long-term and short-term strategies to improve your economic growth. The insight presented a lot of contributes that are going to help with the challenge posed by the inflation in China and are hoped to be very useful and effective.